Chapter 12. Teep opened up on the wildly scrambling creatures, crying out in rage and disgust. Dozens, hundreds clattered through the shaft, alien carriers flocking for prey. The pulse of firepower sent acid and spidery bodies flying, the monsters only shrieking as they died. The chemical scent of melting plasticrete quickly overpowered the cloying stink of the dead body. "Door!" Jess shouted, and Lara inched back towards the control panel, dealing a path in shattered chunks of acid-spewing body parts. Teep felt a burst of self-righteous glee with each screech that signified another death, his rifle hailing pain and destruction across the leaping, crawling facehuggers. They scrambled over spurting pieces of their siblings, desperate to plant their parasitic seed. Pulaski swung the smart gun in wide, sweeping arcs, taking out the bulk of the swarming horde. As Jess and Teep fired at those that crawled out to the sides, Lara reached the control panel and engaged, the door sliding closed as she blew away another of the crawling nightmares. Jess covered Lara as the heavily insulated door panels crunched over seeping acid and bone, the creatures scrabbling to get through in time. Teep blew apart another one in a burst of fire and sound, the vile spat of the exploding creeper, louder now as the elevator sealed. Another skidded towards him, impossibly quick on clattering legs, its long ribbed tail thrusting it forward. Teep cut it in half, deeply satisfied as the hard shell fragmented and spun away, its death cry a strangled metallic screech. Next to him, the Candyman grinned as he sprayed the ticks with caseless rounds. The automatic weapon swept smoothly on its mount, creatures targeted by the infrasensor. From behind a mound of smouldering bodies, another facehugger sprang at Teep. He grinned too, feeling strong and in control as the pulse of bullets peppered the alien baby. "Not gonna get me, you shit. Not me." He fired again and again, the movements in front of him sporadic now. The corridor was littered with dozens of smoking embryo carriers, twitching as they died. Teep turned and searched for a target, but nothing moved. Pulaski had stopped too, and Jess lifted his rifle and held up one hand. Silence, except for the hiss of smoking paneling and a faint ringing in Teep's ears, the aftermath of explosive battle. "We got a reception committee, Pop," said Jess, and exhaled sharply. "Looks like—" The rest of his words were lost as Lara gasped and fired. Teep looked over just in time to see that they had missed one, a coiled tick in the doorframe that had waited for an opportunity to spring. Lara's shot went clear as the facehugger launched itself at her. Teep tracked the creature, but couldn't fire for risk of hitting Lara, and saw Candyman and Jess do the same. Lara dropped her weapon. Her hands flew up to her head and covered her mouth in the split second before it reached her. The creature struck her face, sent her reeling backwards against the wall. The spidery legs wrapped around her helmet, and Teep knew it was only a matter of seconds. Lara wasn't wearing a mask. If the facehugger did its job, she was as good as dead. Jess didn't stop to think as Lara collapsed to the deck. In 2 steps he was at her side, rifle dropped next to hers. "Lara!" Pop shouted into his ear, a cry of panic and fear. The facehugger wasn't seated properly, Lara's hands in its way. The long taloned legs clutched her helmet tightly. The thick ovipositor pushed at the back of her hand. The thick tail looped around her throat and tightening. She gasped for air, struggling to keep the muscular creature from getting a solid grip. The tail slipped tighter, the facehugger working to render her unconscious so it could complete its task. Lara's wide, searching gaze found Jess's as he grabbed at one of the leathery limbs in the tail. It was strong. Hunching its abdomen closer to her purpling, terrified face, even as he pulled. She convulsed, body tightening and legs kicking out. It had cut off her air. "Hold still," said Jess, and Teep was suddenly on Lara's other side, fingers grasping for a hold around the sickly plated tail. Jess focused on the leg with both hands, arms straining as he took a deep breath and yanked. There was a muffled crack, and a tendril of acid blood trickled over the helmet, the creature silent even in pain. "Over here!" Pulaski shouted, behind and to the left. Teep had worked the tail loose. Jess snatched at another leg. There was no time. The alien blood deterred by the helmet's coating, but still seeping towards Lara's forehead in a hissing stream. She pulled in a ragged breath, and tried to keep still. Jess looked at Teep. "On one!" Teep nodded, gripping the tail as it whipped wildly. "One!" Jess and Teep yanked and threw the frantically scrabbling creature away from Lara. Jess watched just long enough to see it hit the ground in front of Pulaski. "Got it!" A short burst of fire, and the crippled alien shrieked and died. For a change, the Candyman wasn't laughing. Jess grabbed for the canister of neutralizer on his belt as Teep carefully unlatched her helmet. Lara still drew in long, shuddering gasps, but didn't move. Jess wondered randomly if he would have remembered his training so well had it happened to him. His thumb found the trigger, and a tight stream of acid neutralizer sprayed across her helmet and clouded it pale green. Even as the chemical did its work, the alien blood dribbled harmlessly onto her clear brow. "You're okay. You're clear," said Jess, and Lara closed her eyes, tears squeezing out from the corners as the sharp fumes enveloped her face. When she opened them, Jess smiled at her gently. He could see gratitude and relief in her wet blue gaze, her breathing shaky but calmer, easier. Teep laid a hand on one of her trembling shoulders and smiled lopsidedly. "If you wanted my job, all you had to do was ask," he said. Pulaski joined them, grinning. "That little fucker is a stain," he said, and Jess grinned himself. It was as close as the Candyman came to expressing sympathy. "Thanks," she whispered, and coughed. Pop broke in again, ignoring procedure to keep silent until reported to. "Lara, are you okay?" His voice was sugary with concern and emotion. Lara closed her eyes again, but not before Jess saw a flash of anger. She sat up slowly, but didn't respond to the question. "She's all right, Pop. Over," said Jess. He didn't know the exact situation, but it was obvious that Lara didn't have dick to say to Izzard. Jess wondered how that would sit with their esteemed commander. Jess and Teep helped her up, and they retrieved weapons, checking for splatters of blood on their armor. The hall was awash in pieces of facehugger and bubbling puddles of dark acid, eating random passages through the deck as it melted. Clouds of toxic-smelling smoke drifted away in the dead air, the stink of the rotting corpse already back. "Well, that sucked. Maybe the stairs are a better option," said Lara, her face paled but contained. She motioned at a door near the end of the corridor and smiled weakly. Jess nodded, impressed by how together she was. Not because she was a woman. Some of the bravest volunteers he'd ever known had been female, in spite of what guys like Pulaski mouthed. But he'd seen soldiers lose it after an attack like that one, torn apart by facing their own deaths, unable to go on without help. Lara tightened her equipment pack and waited. "Pop, I'm calling secure, over." Jess didn't want to, but there was no time to clear. The drones would be coming soon, if they weren't already on their way. "Copy that," said Pop, and his voice was now a blank wall. "Let's move out then. Candyman, lead off," said Jess. "You know it," breathed Pulaski. He moved towards the closed stairwell and activated the smart gun's tracker before opening the door, his broad shoulders tight. Nothing moved. Teep and Lara followed, Jess taking the rear as they descended through the quiet wasteland of Station 949. The Candyman slipped down the tightly angled stairs, unable to see more than a couple of meters ahead because of the curve. He watched the weapon's built-in tracker, pleased as all shit to be in control of the M56 and still pumped from the facehugger action. Man, that Lara was one cool client. He respected anyone who could get up after nearly getting dorked and corked and crack a joke. He went off a lot about boobs and stuff, but there were girls he thought were pretty kick-ass. His wife had set him straight on that. He moved the M56's barrel back and forth and took the blank readings through the setup's eyepiece. The smart gun tracked automatically using infrared sensors, feeding him information through the headset beneath his helmet. On full open, the weapon had a cyclic rate of something like 1,200 rounds per minute. This one had a heatsink installed and was loaded to capacity. So come on already, bugfucks. The Candyman's waiting. He could hear the others a few meters back, quiet except for the soft sound of footsteps on metal. It was warmer than it should be, and humid, but the stairs were clean, no burns or blood. He stopped at a level platform in front of the first door and swept the weapon. There was no movement on the other side. God damn, where were they? The Bogs had been here 2 weeks on a station packed with civilians. They should have been breaking down walls to get at live flesh. Pulaski sighed. "Clear to first door," he said heavily. "Going down." He turned back to the steps and the sensor ticked to life, a blur of motion maybe 3 meters ahead. He grinned, knuckles tightening on the rear grip of the smart gun. "Hold up, I got movement." The wired plexi over his right eye listed coordinates and stats. But all he needed was for it to come on up. Looked like a single drone, creeping slowly, stealthy. The Candyman breathed easily, his brain buzzing and eager for XT bloodshed. The dim stairwell was silent now. Nothing moved. He heard it at the same time the sensor showed another meter spanned, a single step for a drone. A low, guttural hiss reached his ears, and he felt a trickle of sweat run down the small of his back. With a screeching, trumpeting cry, the creature jumped the distance and landed in front of Pulaski. Its talons were spread wide, tail slashing at the air behind it. The inner set of dark metal teeth were revealed in a dripping snarl, the long skull improbably big for the tall insectoid body. The Candyman let the weapon lead his movements, squeezing the trigger as the drone prepared to leap again. The burst of rounds shattered the Bug, its abdomen suddenly a churning explosion of fire and evaporating fluid. Its guts were obliterated, the shards of exoskeleton blowing backward to clatter on the stairs. The M56 tracked the scattering pieces as the animal collapsed, pitching back and landing heavily in a smoking pool of its own blood, a few steps down. Pulaski eagerly checked the sensor, primed for a firefight. "One stinking Bug," he said, and sighed. "Stairs is clear. Going down." He stepped over one massive curled claw, kicking at it in disgust. Bug's was ugly. Skinny, muscled legs and arms, huge claws and feet, tall enough to look down on him even. There weren't eyes in that dusky, banana-shaped head, just teeth within teeth. The inner jaws could extend outward and catch lightning fast. He moved down, past the hissing, smoking mass of dead drone, alert again for movement and sound. One Bug and a handful of facehuggers were at least a start. This wasn't like going into the heat, but it wasn't too bad. Beat the crap out of hanging out at some vacation spot anyway. The Candyman reached the foot of the stairs and stepped through the open doorway of the command center area, getting a good look as he swept for life. "You all better come and take a look at this," he said softly, and in spite of his desire to see some action, the view chilled him. Blowing up Bugs was fun. It revved him up, made him feel like a man. Seeing what they could do, though, on a scale like this one. The coppery scent of blood was thick in the humid air. Pulaski looked away and waited for the team to meet him.